On today's Newsmakers, a lot of buzz still surrounds the Supreme Court's recent decision in the Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton case, a decision that is widely seen as helping to protect children. We welcome ex-porn star Joshua Broome to the show today. He is on a mission to protect kids, and he joined CBN News to praise the Supreme Court's recent ruling and to discuss the issues underpinning it and what he believes could happen next. With no further ado, here is Joshua Broome. Joshua Broome, a lot to talk with you about today. Obviously, the Supreme Court upholding Texas's age verification law. This was big news, one of the big cases to come from the court last week. What was your reaction to seeing this ruling come down?
I was surprised. I thought that for sure it was going to be best case scenario, a remand where they're going to sit it down to a lower court and they were going to fight over some, nuance. But I was shocked, and I think this is a huge deal because it stands precedent for it to be a national implication. So I think this is just a huge, huge deal. I am pumped about it. And to be honest, it's this. It's tough to be super excited about it because the reality is that for there not to be age verification in the first place is actually negligent. So it's like the frustration of, okay, we're finally where we should be, and let's move forward from here.
Yeah, I was listening the other day to an interview with Jonathan Haidt, and he was saying everywhere else we've kind of decided, like in the real world, we've decided who's an adult and who's a child. You can't buy alcohol, you can't vote, you can't buy cigarettes, all of these things until you're a certain age. But on the internet, it's kind of the Wild West. There is no sort of protection until we have laws like these. And like you said, we should have had them long ago. But for people who are maybe a bit skeptical or cynical, what kind of assistance, is this actually going to help parents, these age verification laws? Are they actually useful? Are they worth having?
Yeah, number one, age verification since the inception of pornography was just, hey, click a box. Are you 18?
Right.
Sure. And it was almost like, walking into a convenience store trying to buy alcohol saying, I promise I'm 21. So it's no verification at all. And what we've seen, so Louisiana was the first state to actually implement legislation when this was first talked about. And what we saw in Louisiana is consumption went down 8% because guess what? People don't want to leave an actual digital footprint when they want to watch pornography. It's the same thing that, it deters anyone from doing anything they don't want to be seen doing. And I think that's the most problematic thing of pornography is that you can do that without truly leaving behind breadcrumbs. So I think it's certainly helpful.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this question because obviously the coalition, the porn industry coalition that was challenging this, the Free Speech Coalition, their big claim was that this violated free speech rights for adults, right? So what is your reaction to that? Because that was the argument they were putting forward, that somehow this was a restriction of free speech.
Yeah, so they're saying that this is an infringement on their First Amendment rights, and that's ridiculous because if you're going to have anything in the public square that has been deemed potentially dangerous to children or just people in general, well, you have to put parameters around this thing. And we've seen there's significant neurological studies that have said, hey, if a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, 8 years old is the average age of consumption, if their prefrontal cortex, which is the thing that allows them to regulate their emotions, if it's around 50% or less developed, and pornography actually deteriorates the part of the brain that is currently 50% developed, obviously this is a dangerous thing for kids to engage in. And as a follower of Jesus, I would say, gosh, the implications regarding sex, identity, all these things, it has terrible implications, but their pushback to say, hey, you're taking away my right to see something. Well, it clearly, according to the Supreme Court, which I was not shocked that they upheld that. I was shocked that they upheld it completely, but it's not a barrier; it's a boundary. It's saying, hey, if you want to watch it, do the requirement, provide your ID, and if you're 18 or older, then watch it all you want. So it's in no way an infringement on your rights. It's just a barrier.
How do you, Josh, see this practically impacting the porn industry? Because for somebody like me, I live in Virginia. We have similar laws in place. And what ultimately has happened, like in several states, is the largest porn site has just said, you know what, we're going to block the site altogether. You can't even access the site in the state of Virginia. Ironically, they think that that's some sort of like win for them, like there, but really our governor just said, oh great, you're doing my job for me. There are a lot of states that are making similar moves, and now with this Supreme Court precedent, do you think that this ends with just porn leaving these states altogether?
I mean, you look back at so in 2012 in Los Angeles County, which was where 80% of the pornography that was filmed, that's where all the studios were. And then in Los Angeles County, they decided to implement a condom mandate. And this was right after I got out of the industry. So I'm on these sets 20 plus times a month, and some people are saying like, are they actually implementing this? Are there any kind of checks and balances? Every single time I was on a set, there was always a police officer that stopped by and asked, "Hey, where's your permit?" Obviously, they're why they were there. That's up for a different conversation. But yes, like a police officer was checking, was there a permit each and every time. So with that said, in 2012, condoms were mandated in Los Angeles County. The entire industry picks up and moves to Las Vegas. So this is something that they've done in the past. So where they can't thrive, will they geographically move? Probably, but then you have OnlyFans and things like that. So the way that people consume and even create pornography is drastically changed. So my hope would be, yes, to your point, where there is the implementation of this verification, like Louisiana, 80% drops off, and Pornhub thinking, hey, or other sites thinking, hey, if we pull out of this state, there's going to be people with picket signs saying, "Hey, give me back my porn," and that's not realistic. So it's interesting to see what they'll do. They probably thought that they would win this to some extent, but the same thing, man. I was at Capitol Hill 4 years ago, and we were talking about this age verification, and before it had even made it to the ears of everyone that was in the room, Pornhub had already created something called VPN Hub, and it was created to go around the VPN that was installed on your phone. And there's many other pieces of technology that exist right now that people are creating technology, and you just, hey, download this on your phone and you can bypass the age verification. So how does that I think there's going to have to be legislation written with nuances to, hey, you can't use AI to go around legalities. So it's going to be complicated. So I think will they pull out of every state? I don't know, but I think that and Section 230, it just allows social media to be a place where pornography can be housed. So I wouldn't be surprised if Twitter turns into Pornhub because it would be financially advantageous for them to do so, and they're not far from it today.
Yeah, I think you're referring there to obviously changing technology. People are going to react to this ruling by shifting and doing things we haven't even seen yet, right? And you mentioned AI, the rise of AI, a lot of good and a lot of horrible things are going to come from that. So people are going to be using those things, adapting them. But, you mentioned the industry. Obviously, for those who don't know your story, you came out of the porn industry. You were in it for years. You later became a Christian. You now have been speaking against the industry. A lot of people have said, well, why are we even allowing porn? Prostitution in most places is illegal. Of course, there are moves to try to legalize that. What would you say if somebody came to you and said, Josh, as somebody who used to work in this industry who now speaks out against it, should pornography be banned outright, where we're not even having this conversation anymore? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say because pornography is not regulated. We saw last year there was over 100,000 pieces of content that was on porn sites that were non-consensual, that was underage, and it was. I hate to be crass, but it was rape, and it was child pornography, and There's literally people who were trafficking children, raping them, and putting them on Pornhub, and it was on there for years and years, and it was monetized. And it wasn't one piece, it wasn't two pieces, it was hundreds of thousands of pieces of content that happens on a daily basis. So when you watch porn, the reality is, I've got 43 people who, I'm 42 years old. I've been out of that industry for over a decade, yet I still have videos like on websites. But the reality is there's people that should be living a normal life that have left that industry, that went the path that I went, where I got counseling, I got plugged into a healthy community, I found Jesus, my life was transformed. Now I'm living my life trying to impact the world in a positive way. I'm married, I have kids. We wrote an awesome book together, Billy. But the reality is 43 people that should be the same age as me are dead, and they took their life via suicide or overdose. And when they died, Pornhub said, "Hey, let's make a compilation film to honor them. AKA, let's see how we can monetize their death and amplify it for our good." And those scenes are still on the internet. So the probability of you watching porn of someone who took their very life because of the content that was on there, that they didn't want it to be on there anymore, is a reality. And to the people who say, well, people still watch Thriller and things like that, you have been so brainwashed to think that pornography in mainstream media is remotely close to the same thing. It is not. I've never received 1 cent of a royalty or any kind of residual payment. That is not the way that industry works. That industry is built on manipulation and coercion and fraudulent documentation that forces people to do things they really don't want to do, and then they hold it over their head and they continue to monetize over it over and over and over again. To the person watching it saying, "Hey, what's the big deal?" You don't know how old that person is. You don't know if they wanted to be there. And the reality is, it's damaging your brain. It's impacting society in a negative way. And it's contributing to many things that are drastically evil that you would not agree with.
And you mentioned earlier that explicit porn sites, like websites that are designed just for pornography, the issue is not with them alone. Like places like Twitter, now called X, obviously, and Reddit, both of those sites, and I'm sure there are others, but I know that both of those websites have a major problem with pornography. So with a ruling like this in a state like Texas, Virginia, Utah, I know several others have similar laws in place. Does that mean that those websites, places like X and Reddit, are going to have to start implementing age verification? Because, really, we could talk about X all day long, because not only do they have a porn problem, they have a child porn problem. But, how do you see that unfolding as the days and months move forward?
I would say that we have to stop putting the burden on the consumer. It has to be on the contributor, the one that's contributing the content, the one that's creating the content, the one that's distributing the content. Because here's the reality: they all use AI to scan their website, and they very quickly identify fraud, any kind of fraud that it impacts them in a negative way, any kind of copyright infringement that impacts them in a negative way. So they need to be held liable for housing what's on their website. So that's why this is a step in the right direction. Section 230 is the thing that allows Reddit, Twitter, X, websites like that to hide, because it allows them to have immunity. They're saying, hey, we didn't post it, so we shouldn't be held liable for it, even if we benefit from it directly. It's on our hard drive. We're making money off of it, but we didn't put it there. We're just taking our cut. Well, you need to be held responsible for that. And I think that in itself is a big problem. And that's the next step in the right direction, that Section 230 needs to be either completely wiped or significantly revamped, because for a site like X to not be held liable for having hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pieces of child pornography on it is insane. Literally anyone else in the world would go to prison. Most certainly anyone in the United States would go to prison for stuff that's on their site each and every day, yet because of Section 230, they're not held liable.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see, too, how this is sort of, there are certain websites that maybe not very much of the content, would qualify under this Texas law. But if it's 1/3 of the content on that platform or website, it then crosses that line, right? So there may be websites that don't qualify now that may qualify in 2 years and vice versa. So that part of this will be interesting. I believe it's 1/3 of the content has to be objectionable for young people in order for it to qualify. So it's going to be interesting to watch this unfold. Josh, where can people go to find out more about you and your amazing work?
Yeah, I mean, you could go to my website, so joshuabroome.me, and my social media across the board is I am Joshua Broome. And just to say one more thing to what you said, I think we're just in dangerous waters because, outside of Whole Foods, 10 years ago, you could deem, because Whole Foods is a certified organic store, meaning that there's prerequisites that they have for them to have things in their store. If they're going to call them organic, there's a standard they've set that they're committed to. But 10 years ago, naked fruit juice could say that it's organic, yet it was only made with there was a percentage or an amount of ingredients that were organic, but it could literally have, cyanide in it. It could have something that's incredibly dangerous, something that you would find in a cleaner, yet they would deem it organic because the way that the law was written. That's why it's so important. Like, policy matters because people matter. And it's like, man, you really got to dig into this stuff because people they were advertising things as organic because it was advantageous for them. They're not trying to sell a healthy product. They were trying to make money. So at the end of the day, when you're going to call something, that's why our language matters. That's why I will never say adult film industry, because the porn is not something that is for adults. Like, when should you watch it? You shouldn't. It's not good for you. So it's pornography that comes from the Greek New Testament around sexual immorality, and it's been written on caves, in Mesopotamia 2,000 years ago. It's always been problematic. Look at Ephesus. Look at Corinth. This is not a new problem, but we're consuming it in a new way, and it needs to be regulated.
Well, Joshua Broome, appreciate you coming on to break it all down today.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today's Newsmakers. Make sure you head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel and cbnnews.com for more of the news you need to read. We'll see you again tomorrow.